Finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of BS Free MD. Tim's got a little bit of a cold, a man cold, he would say, is a bit under the weather, but he's thinking of you. We have this pre-recorded podcast with Coach K, and we're super excited to bring you that this week. Coach K is an amazing guest, a dedicated advocate for holistic health, personal development, and lifelong fitness. Coach K has made a name for herself in the world of coaching, empowering countless individuals to break free from conventional approaches and embrace mindful living. In this episode, Tim and I and Coach K embark on a fascinating journey through the world of coaching and wellness, guided by her profound insights and experiences. We talk about the transformative power, really, of coaching and helping individuals achieve their health and wellness goals. She will also sort of give you some insight and share her personal journey and the pivotal moments that really led her to become a driving force in the world of holistic health. And Tim and I kind of delve deep with her into the core principles too that drive her coaching philosophy and discover how she has successfully merged her expertise with our own medical backgrounds to create a holistic approach to wellness. So if you're ready to gain a fresh perspective and listen to some real mindful living stories, personal development, and the transformative power of coaching, you're in the right place. Stay tuned because we're going to embark on this incredible journey with Coach K right here on BS Free MD. All right, here we are. I'm super excited for this episode. I think Tim is as well, since we get to hang out again and visit with our friend and Coach K, or Christina, as we call her, who has her own podcast, and we've worked with her one-on-one as our coach last year. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah,
with
of course.
us, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me. I was super excited when you guys reached out about being on the podcast, and obviously had a great time coaching both of you last year. I think that was. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to connect again.
So without going into all of our ups and downs and personal stuff with coaching, which we've done on our own podcast and shared, and that's been fun, we wanted to have you on so that you could talk to our audience about your story and what your how you got into coaching and your background and your podcast. And I listened to your podcast. I love it. I love the guests. I love the whole psychology and mindset training and work that you do, which I learned from last year. So why don't you start by just sharing a little bit with our audience, your background in sport, in school, growing up, and how that got you to where you're at today.
For sure. That's a big question to start off. So if I get long-winded, you just let me know. But
all right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been coaching for 10 plus years now, basically my entire professional career, even starting when I was getting my master's degree as well. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the specifics of that. But my journey with fitness and sports and all that definitely started in childhood. You know, just like any other kid who played sports, I played tons of sports, but then ended up narrowing it down to basketball, and played competitive basketball in high school and through college. But it was in high school where this mindset piece and my passion for psychology, without me even really realizing it, really started. And the reason it started was actually when I was a sophomore in high school, almost without realizing, which I know sounds crazy to even say now, but I ended up very heavy for a 15, 16-year-old. I actually weighed the heaviest that I have as an adult by far. I weighed 208 pounds as a 15-year-old. And I was active. I was an active kid. Like I played competitive basketball. I was always actually one of the best on my team. And so, like I said, it kind of just happened without me even realizing. I was always being told I was great at basketball and I was doing good things there and all of this, but it almost felt like I woke up one day and realized I was too heavy. And luckily, I had this coach at the time. She was one of the assistant varsity basketball coaches from my high school, and she ran a summer conditioning program. And I would go to these sessions during the summer. It was hot in Sacramento, like 100 plus degrees. We're out there running stadium stairs and running time miles and stuff like that. And I was terrible at this stuff. Like you put me on a basketball court, I could get the job done, but you make me go run a time mile. And I was running like a 10:30 mile, which at the time was quite a bit slower than a lot of my other teammates. So this coach at the time kind of started getting in my ear about it a little bit. And luckily she was doing it in a productive way. It was basically trying to get me to realize like, hey, you have so much more potential than this. And like, hey, let's get you to start taking care of your body in ways that maybe you don't even realize you can and whatever. So basically at that point, that started my journey of realizing, I am working hard in some way, like I'm training for basketball and I'm good at basketball and whatever, but there's so many other things I could be doing to take care of my health and to change my habits and to focus on the mindset piece of things. And so I started doing little things like, well, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about habits today, but I started logging my food in a little journal, right? I wasn't using my Fitness Pal at the time or anything, but I was just like writing down what I thought I was, eating. And I would set little challenges for myself. Like I didn't know a whole lot about nutrition at the time, but I'd be like, okay, this week I'm like not going to eat any cookies, right? Or like this week I'm not going to eat any chips. Or I just started to make all these little small changes. And I also started going to the gym, like the actual fitness gym, not the basketball gym. And I started setting these challenges for myself where I'd get on the treadmill and I would run a time mile. And every time I would go to the gym, and I was going multiple times a week, I would just press one level up on the treadmill. You know how it goes like 6.0, 6.1, 6.2. And I would just go one level up each time. And eventually, about a year later, got to the point where I had lost 20 plus pounds and started running like a 7:30 mile at the time. And that just like really started this trajectory for me of realizing there's so much more potential here, right? Like if I just set my mind to something and I just start taking these small steps, let's see what I can accomplish. And I ended up playing college basketball, worked super, super hard. That work ethic piece kind of transferred over to that. Since I was talking about the time mile, I ended up running an under 6-minute time mile by my senior year of college. So I made huge improvements there. And I ended up being an All-American college basketball player. So, I definitely thank a lot of my mentors and coaches in high school and stuff like that. But that definitely started this trajectory for me, like I've been saying, about how important habits are, how important the mindset piece of things is, and just realizing like we have this ability to do really cool things. And so I decided I wanted to get into coaching, and that started off with collegiate basketball coaching because that's kind of what I knew at the time. So I went and got my master's in coaching and then spent about 7 years coaching collegiate basketball, including becoming the head women's basketball coach at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. And then it was during COVID where I decided to make a little bit of a career change and move into the remote working world, a little bit more of the personal training world. And when I started working for Redefining Strength as a one-on-one fitness and nutrition coach. So that's where I met you guys, obviously. And in that position, I work with clients all over the world and helping them program out their fitness and nutrition programs. So that's what I'm currently doing, along with also my podcast, Making Changes, Breaking Barriers, which I've started. And that's where I really am focusing on that mental side of things, the psychology behind changing our behaviors, getting over roadblocks. And so that's been really fun to have as a little bit of like a passion project and getting to talk about something that I really love.
So I want to ask about your high school coach that sort of gave you the wake up call, because we have seen in our practice and in our personal life some really devastating damage done in high school sports. Eating disorders in wrestlers,
Yeah,
eating
I had an
disorders.
eating disorder.
I mean, May had an eating disorder.
We've seen it in our kids' sports.
Coaches, you're too slow, you're too fat, like really, really harsh, kind of scary stuff that ultimately when you see what happens to these people, their performance may increase. They become very neurotic, and then you see them, years later, and they've just gave up. They're just like, if this is what it means to, be fit and be disciplined, I'm not going to do it. I'll just eat whatever I want. And it's very sad. So what on earth did your coach say that actually encouraged you and didn't damage you? As we know, I mean, being an adolescent is hard, like male, female, whatever. I mean, it is really difficult. Our bodies are changing. Obviously there's tons of self-conscious issues that, all of us went through. Now it's worse with social media. I mean, none of this stuff existed.
Me either.
May and I mean, we scratched stuff on the walls of caves.
Yeah, you guys are old. So yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Yes,
exactly.
So what did she say? He or she say that was like, okay, I'm better than this, or
or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was all Christina.
Well, it sounds like it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I just.
So I'm glad you bring that up because I do think that that's really important. And I do want to also say that time didn't come without the self-consciousness. And I do definitely remember, I say one day I just kind of woke up and I realized I was heavy. In a sense, that was the case, but I also do remember times where thinking, okay, it's summer, getting into a bathing suit. This feels a little bit less comfortable for me than maybe it does for some of my friends. And there was like a little bit of that, but I think because I did have sports and I was good at sports, that really helped my self-confidence as well, right? So it was probably maybe not as bad as some kids experience it as. But I think there's two parts to this, and I'll actually start with someone that wasn't my coach, and that was actually my parents. And I do think, looking back, that the approach that they took had its pros and cons because, and I've talked to them about this before, they obviously played a part in me getting that heavy, but at the same time, they also very much allowed me to be in that process on my own with support, if that makes sense. So like when I did start to dial things in, my parents weren't people who were saying like, you need to lose weight or you're very unhealthy or like none of that stuff that might really sit with a kid pretty badly. It was very much just like support. Okay, you're wanting to eat healthy. Like, okay, let's see what healthy meals we can incorporate. And, let's see if we can take out some of the unhealthy snacks and stuff like that. But they allowed me to make those changes kind of on my own, which I think in the long run, even to being an adult now, really, really has helped me. When it comes to my coach, I think what was really beneficial there was she always took an approach of this matters because of your performance. It was always performance based. So it was never so much about the nutrition. She talked to us as a group in general about the nutrition, but it was performance. So it was like, hey, let's see if we can increase this mile time, right? Hey, let's see if we can get you to be in the middle of the pack on these stair runs, or different things like that. Hey, let's see if we can get you to be, at least top 3 in these liners or whatever we were doing. And so I think the performance-based part of it really helped me. Obviously, that requires someone is doing something that could be performance-based sports or something along those lines. And I think that's actually transferred over to my adult life now. I find if I don't have something to train for, my nutrition quickly starts to go out the window. And I actually love having something to train for. Yeah. Like I love it. I'm competitive. So like right now I'm actually training for my first ever half Ironman. So we'll see how that goes. It's in October and I've a couple weeks into training. And my nutrition's been great. But when I don't have that, I'm like, oh, let's go drink beers and eat nachos, So that's definitely transferred over.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey. Guilty. No, that's.
I love that. Definitely putting or changing the shift to the performance and activity is so different than saying that blaming you or the person as this is unhealthy. It's like, how can we channel this so that it's all about goals and not about you personally as a failure or identifying as a fat person or whatever, or a skinny person, underweight, whatever it may be, but as in this is going to benefit your performance And if that's, really meaningful to you, then that translates.
Yeah,
it's such a fine balance though, because man, I was just finished reading the audiobook of Mel Robbins' book. I'm going to lose the title of it right now. Take Control of Your Life, which man hit some chords for me, but there's a part in there where you have to be almost careful. And I don't know if you've read her book or know much about it, but it also talks about the perfectionism and kids that get labeled smart, or talented and gifted in academics, and that's all they know. So then once they start to fail at something, they feel like they're a failure. And I guess that could happen in sport too, right? It's like once you've reached or maxed out your potential, and we see this a lot in high school sports and kids, they max out in high school athletics, and then they don't make a college team. And then it's over, and then they're like, well, I guess I'm over as a person because I've maxed out my potential. So that'll be interesting to pick your brain a little bit on what you think, especially that, when people, because most kids aren't going to get athletic scholarships to colleges compared to the number of kids playing like Pop Warner to then whatever high school sport. So how do you shift that psychology and that level of thinking from high school athletics to, okay, I've maxed out my school potential. How do I keep this as a lifelong skill in sport and not just identify or lose your identity as a kid where it's all over?
Yeah.
If that makes sense at all.
I've listened to a few of Mel Robbins' podcasts. I have not read her book yet, but I need to do it. It's definitely on my list. But I do think it's a super fine balance. I think one thing to remember, and I've never was really in youth sports a whole lot, but I was in collegiate sports. And you still get, those kids are still young, even though most of them are over 18, they feel young. And I think it's a very fine balance. And I think one thing that was always very huge for me, even just as a coach in general, is realizing that every kid is a little bit different. And like, there may be a kid that wants to wake up at 6 a.m. before school and train with their parent who was also a collegiate athlete, and they're excited about it and they're excited to do it. Maybe they have a day where they're not, but for the most part, like, this is something that they want. And so, yeah, let's push them. Let's help them, towards their goals of being in the WNBA or whatever it is. Right. But there's also going to be plenty of kids who that's not them. Right. And they don't have that drive. And then it's more, so I think listening to the kid and listening to what it is they want and realizing they're going to be emotional beings and there's going to be ups and downs and stuff like that. But like really trying to get to know them and listen to them when they're saying things and not just assume that you should just keep pushing them in one direction if that's not really what they want anymore. Because the reality is, if you do that, they are going to be done at 18, right? They're going off to college most of the time and going to get to do what they want. So even if they do end up getting the college scholarship, I had plenty of friends go play college sports and end up playing a year or two and then they're done, right? Even D1 players, and then that's even harder almost, because then they do very much feel like a failure and, oh, I've lost my scholarship now. And, but in reality, that maybe wouldn't have been the path they would have chosen in the first place.
Yeah, it's such a hard balance because, people just need to do the math, and it's just, when our son was playing hockey, May's like, oh man, the kids that are like way better than him, like, those are the kids that could get into the NHL. I looked at her and I just started laughing. I said, look up how many kids that are born in Oregon have made it to the NHL. It's like one.
That's crazy.
And it's just, it just doesn't, there's certain realities. And, we've talked to families where they spent the equivalent of the entire tuition for 4 years of college so that their kid could get an athletic scholarship, and then they play 1 year. And
with like traveling sports.
Sports. Well, then she'll get a scholarship. And it's just like, no. If it's money and scholarships, you're way better off to have smart kids than athletic kids. Let's just be really honest about that. There's lots of academic scholarships. There's not a lot of full rides to, D1 caliber schools. Yeah, that's just the way it is.
The crazy thing is though, so that's like the majority of the time, but I have to say this, I was just watching the NBA draft and there was a guy who got drafted, I forget to what team, And he was talking about how his dad basically used his whole 401k to pay for his travel ball. And here he is now, getting an NBA contract, which even that first NBA contract is at least $1 million contract, and so I think that's what people or what parents, and I'm not a parent, so I have to say that, but this is just my experience of being in coaching and from what I know, but you almost start to hold on to that one case and you think, well, this could be my kid.
Yes,
but
exactly.
People that make the NHL, people who make the NBA, those kids, they're unique, right? And I think we have to recognize that. We have to look, and if that's not the case, that's okay too.
No, that's exactly
right.
Like what we did I'm actually proud of what we have done from a fitness perspective with our kids. Our kids are super different. Our daughter is way different than our son. Our son is super self-motivated. He did a full Ironman in under 13 hours the first time he tried. He did 4 years of junior varsity cross country. He was not a fast runner, but he just never quits, right? And so for him, he's always going to do fitness stuff. Our daughter, she swam. She was not a super stellar athlete. She still swims. She is still a lifeguard. She's still fit. She still cares about that. She still researches how to change her diet if she, feels like she wants to lose weight or change her body or whatever. And so I look at that and I go, that's success. Now, neither of them were stellar athletes in high school, but they're really stellar people as far as taking care of their bodies as adults. And from my perspective, that's the whole
I totally
point.
agree. Just to bring it back to high school again, like I had some friends who were the best on their comp soccer team and whatnot. And, and they were, parents had them so strict with their nutrition. And then as soon as they go to college and they're on their own, they gain 20, 30, 40 pounds and their favorite food is cereal. And, it's kind of an extreme case, but yes. So to be able to somehow find that, if you're not that unique, 1 in 100,000 kids who's going to make an NBA, NHL, some sort of professional team, then how can we find a way to make this fitness long lasting so you can be healthy for what is going to be the majority of your life? I think it's important.
So yeah, since we're on that topic still, and I kind of want to sort of finish it off with, what are your thoughts as, having grown up in sport? I don't know how active your siblings, I know you have siblings, and your parents were athletically, but how, since most of us aren't going to be like professional athletes, tennis players, that's my thing, basketball, and whatever it is, what do you think is a safe and healthy way to try to encourage or help parents and encourage kids to make it an activity that is a lifelong thing for health?
So I think if you have a kid who loves their sport, let them play their sport. And I think in a way, don't put too much pressure on that. Winning is not going to be the most important thing. Them being a starter is not the most important thing, but them just being part of that team. And the majority of the time in your sport, you're practicing, you're not playing games. Right. And so let them go to practice, be part of a team and get the fitness in. Right. If they're not part of a sport, I think getting kids outdoors is huge, because I think there is such an emphasis on team sports or, those sort of popular high school sports in our society. But I live in a place now in Bend, Oregon, where that isn't the biggest thing. The biggest thing is mountain biking, it's skiing, it's cross country skiing, it's all these other things. I went to this, this is very new to me, but a criterium for the first time yesterday. They have one locally. I didn't do it. Wow. I went to go watch our friend who was doing it here in Bend. But, there was what looked like 16-year-old boys on their road bikes out there doing that, and so I think just recognizing that there's so many different ways to get that activity and fitness in. And so, pulling kids away from the TVs and the iPads and stuff like that, I think is huge.
I mean, like playing outside, like we used to do, exactly, where you're kicked outside. Right. But most of what we do as adults is not, if it's athletics, is not team sports, right? I mean, I know some people that do play pickup leagues in basketball, golf, if you want to call it. It's not really a team sport, but people get together to do it. There's a few others, like I did curling in Canada, but for the most part, as adults, we are doing individual sports in groups. And so,
I'm just going to call BS because it is BS for MD on curling. It is super fun. But any sport where in between your turn to throw the rock, you can smoke half a pack of cigarettes is probably not really the activity that we
No,
want to promote.
come on. That's
Smoking and drinking is an advantage in curling. So
you can whatever. You can do that.
I always mock her
you
for
can
that
do that
stuff.
in golf with your
Although the
cocktails
sweeping is quite vigorous.
making fun of me, whatever.
The sweeping is quite vigorous.
Synchronized swimming, however, because I was a state provincial level synchronized swimmer. You can't really do that on your own either. I guess you could, but then it's like a Saturday Night Live skit, right?
Yeah. May grew up in a place like literally people would have a cigarette in their mouth whilst they were sweeping the rock.
I think it also depends on people's age, right? So like when you're 30, curling, golfing may not be the activity you need to necessarily keep you totally fit. But when you're 70, if you go and walk a golf course and have a full range of motion on that swing, I would say you're doing pretty good. So I don't know. It might also depend on that.
See, I got backing.
No, that's exactly. Oh, I mean, golf course about 5 miles. I mean, that's a serious walk.
Yeah.
It's 5 miles and about 18 beers though. So that's the other side.
That's how I would play if I go play. I mean, I don't really go play, but if I got suckered into it, that's what I would be doing.
So tell us a little bit about going from coaching as basketball to now coaching clients in their everyday struggles in life. I mean, obviously it's quite different from coaching a team, but I guess you're still coaching in each individual on the team. What have you sort of taken from that experience coaching basketball and sort of are using in coaching clients? Any thoughts or tips on how you've used that experience?
That's a really good question. So a basketball team, luckily, is pretty small when you think about it. I mean, we had anywhere from 11 to, I think actually we had a big team of like 16 one time, but it's small enough, very different from, let's say, a football program where I had a very good relationship or very close relationship with pretty much every member of our team. And so with that, I think one of the strengths that I had, and I had some weaknesses too, but one of the strengths I had as a college basketball coach was I was a player's coach, and I did get to know each person on a personal level. And I really tried to figure out, it takes time, but I tried to figure out what was going to motivate each person, what was going to demotivate each person, what was going to frustrate someone versus what was going to, get them to perform their best. And like I said, that takes time, but I think that really translates over to my clients now. I get given a client in the job that I have right now, and supposedly we're supposed to be a good fit, but there's this whole process, and generally this takes a few weeks of me really trying to dig into all those things I just mentioned. What's going to motivate them? What's not going to motivate them? What's going to help them just to keep going? Because a lot of the times that is what most successful people do, is they just keep going. It's not always going to be perfect, but they never get to a point where they just quit. Right? Where they just say, this isn't worth it. Let me just go back to everything I was doing before, which wasn't working, because that's why they came to us in the first place. So really trying to dig into someone as an individual and not just say, this is how we do things. This is how change works. And this either works for you or it doesn't, I think is something that has really transferred over, in basically any coaching role I've had.
Yeah. The thing that we find so tough in medicine is it's in the coaching world, people come to you because they want to change. And so you can kind of say, hey, this is what's worked for other people. I'm happy to help you out. I'm glad that you're here. But there's a point where if people just don't want to take your advice, then it's just not going to work and they can go someplace else. When I see my primary care patients and I have a small primary care panel, I'm seeing people that have absolutely zero motivation, like none. They're there because their blood sugar is too high or they're whatever. And so to say to them, we can do all of this without medications, but this is what it's going to take. It means nothing. Like it's like going to, one of the homeless camps and saying, we're going to start an aerobics class. And the first thing we're going to do is take away all of your drugs. It's like, okay, if they were really motivated to change, there's lots of ways to change. And so I don't know if you have any tips. It's like, what do you do for people that are Do you ever work with people that are just essentially entirely disengaged, but are there anyways?
I'm like, do they really show up on your doorstep completely disengaged? I can't imagine that, but we could be wrong.
I mean, that's always been my frustration. Like, I have a lot of engaged patients, and most people are at least somewhat engaged. And when you throw the bone out there, it's like, we're going to start getting rid of pills. My mission is for you to be off of all medications. They'll perk up. Some people, it's just like, whatever. And I'm just like, we throw a lot of money away in American healthcare on people that are just like shrugging their shoulders. I mean, May showed a video to me yesterday of the heart attack grill where a guy was literally lifting up he's 380 pounds. He's lifting up his shirt to show his bypass scars as he scarfs down 9,500 calories. I'm like,
let's celebrate that. But
you shouldn't have health insurance,
really tough question. First of all, I do have to ask because I'm curious, and I haven't gotten this update from you guys. Are you guys in Florida now, or are you still in Oregon?
Okay. No, we are still in Oregon. We are heading down in the fall, so we're still here. We sold our house, moved into tiny house, I call it, in town.
Okay.
So we are still here, heading there in the fall.
So you still have your patients that you've had for a while. Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
so.
Yes.
I'm going to throw something out there, my thoughts, but again, I'm sure you guys have thought of this and this is your profession, not mine. But if I was getting a client, it's hard to say I would get a client who's totally disengaged because the way our program works is they are paying a lot of money. So you would have to assume there's like a little bit of motivation there. But if I was getting a client who was on the low end of engagement and who seems like they're coming to us for some reason that they're almost being forced to or something along those lines, I would really try and dig into what they do care about, and I would keep that conversation going for as long as I could. And that would be a something I would be able to do. And maybe you guys wouldn't in the profession that you have, but I would really try and get them to dig into what matters to them, what their priorities are, what a desired future would look like for them, right? Just try and get them to like dream. Hey, say don't think about logistics. Don't think about any, like, what would you want your life to look like 5 years from now if you could? And I think sometimes there are people who, I do that all the time. I feel like I almost do that every day, but that's also just the world that I live in. I feel like I've gotten some clients before who have never thought about that, who have never just dreamed about what their future could look like if they didn't think about all the roadblocks they might run into, or money, or all the logistics. And yes, those logistics matter, but just getting them to think about that a little bit and what they actually care about, I think would be the first step I would take. Because like I said, some people don't do that. Some people get so wrapped up in taking care of everyone else that they just don't even think there's a possibility that they can take care of themselves, or they've just given up completely in some way for some reason.
I think I think that is tremendous advice.
Yeah, exactly. It hit home because we did that actually with some financial planning work we did a few years ago, and it's the same thing, to start to, even if you can't, if you're so caught up in the day-to-day of your life that it doesn't matter if it's finances like it was for me, or fitness if you've never been there, to even just imagine if you had unlimited sort of resources, or if you had unlimited fitness ability to do, just dream. What would you do? What would your like day and your life and your free time and social time and like fitness life look like? Just to imagine that is a brilliant starting point, because I think so many people don't even do that.
Yeah,
intelligent people, not just
It does. The intelligence part has nothing to do with this.
Even if you are already kind of on a path, sometimes it's helpful to sit down and write it down. Just let your mind wander and dream. Well, what if ultimately, if you could just imagine something else, like a different path or avenue, like what would that look like?
Well, but it's interesting because there was a UK study that they did on people in hospice, and they asked them, they collated what was your biggest regret, and these people they have 6 months or less left to live, so they are very honest. And the number one thing is, I lived my life based on what I thought other people thought I should do instead of what I actually wanted to do. So I think we're answering the question that you posed, is most people, like the vast majority of people, have no consideration for where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I really like? Why am I spending money on this thing that's supposed to make me happy when maybe it's really some other things I could use resources for? So it really, I mean, our financial planner actually sat us down and said, here, do these, like, when you're retired, what's your day going to look like? And I'm the guy, because sarcasm is my love language, that just writes down hookers and blow. But, you know,
May, how do you do it, May? How do you
all
do
I can
it?
say
How
is
do you do
sorry.
it?
I have earplugs in all the time.
No, so, but it really makes you kind of go, okay, I'm working my absolute rear off. I'm plowing money into a 401k because that's what you're supposed to do, so you can retire at whatever age it is. And if you retire earlier, you win even more. But what do you win? And I sat there looking at that paper, and it's like, what's your good? Well, I'm going to get up, going to take a shower. I'm going to work out. I'm going to take a shower. And you're like, whoa, what am I saving for, man?
And it's the same
Like,
with
it's same
with health and fitness, right?
It's just like, wow, this is crazy. Like, and then you get into it, kind of the Jordan Peterson stuff. It's like, you're going to sit on a beach and you're going to drink 10 margaritas a day, man. It's not a life, and it's like, because it's not a life. And so it really was just an amazing wake up call. And I'm like, perfect. Thanks. I don't need to retire now. I'll just keep working.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
if there's not something that's super exciting to you about retirement, that's different than what you're doing now, then exactly, like, don't put so much money into that 401k. I know for me, if I don't have some sort of fitness when I'm retired, then I'm not going to be happy. Right. And so when I'm thinking about what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis for my body, one of my goals is when I do retire, I'm fit enough and healthy enough, and, my joints are all feeling well enough that I can go out and hike a ton and bike a ton and even still maybe run and swim and do all these things. Because if I can't do that, then, I'm doing something wrong right now, in my opinion. And I also wanted to say, Tim, I think what you were describing there, I've heard of it as your ideal self versus your ought self. And your ought self is like what everyone else, what every other thing thinks you ought to be, versus, which is the way, like you said, most people think about things, will go their whole life thinking about and making decisions based off of, versus what's my ideal self, or like we were talking about, what's my dream moving forward.
So I want to keep kind of going down that avenue and have you talk about a little bit about, so what happens, do you deal with this a lot where people are on I know the answer to this, but are on a program, they're motivated. We see this all the time. We've been there too, personally. I think everybody does, but you reach a point where it's like, yeah, you're gung-ho. It's like everybody signs up for the gym in January, and then motivation and then interest wanes with time. And how about with coaching one-on-one? Do you see that a lot where people start to lose motivation, incentive, even when they're paying the money? There's a lot of incentive there. And how do you help people realize it's not always about motivation, but it's about routine and getting through the hard times? So how do you help people through that?
You guys have heard me say it. I say it on my podcast. I say it in my classes, within my job. I say it to my clients. Motivation is crap. Right? Motivation is crap. It's one of those feelings that's fun. Like, it's a cool feeling when it comes, we don't necessarily want to stop it. When we have motivation, let's take advantage of it. But it does not last. It will only last for a temporary amount of time. And so if we are relying on it, at some point when that motivation dies down, we're just going to basically stop whatever we're doing. We're just going to resort back to old habits, old routines, the old way of doing things. And so to answer your question, yes, this happens quite frequently with a lot of the clients that I work with, and I never fault anyone for it. I think it's something that we haven't really been taught to deal with or taught to think about. But I think it's a really important thing when it comes to making any sort of change in our life, whether it's fitness and nutrition related or something else. You even talk about producing a podcast. When I was starting to think about producing a podcast, I read some stat that like 95% of podcasts don't ever make it past the 20th episode, right? Someone's like so excited to start a podcast and they produce 10 episodes and then they realize it's kind of hard and they run out of things to talk about and then they just stop, right? That motivation has died down.
Hey Have you heard of hyperbaric therapy?
If you want better circulation, oxygenation, or respiration,
Turn up the volume.
everyone appreciates the increased energy and clarity.
Athletes, say goodbye to those PRs because you're going to blast
So
them.
how does it work?
We load your body with oxygen.
That means
Less inflammation,
fewer allergies,
faster healing, and more.
Come see us, 1200 Executive Parkway.
You know, the Upside Down building.
Call us 541-636-3278.
That's 541-636-3278.
We have some incredible deals.
Heal, build, and thrive
With New Leaf Hyperbarics.
Got air?
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
I think it really reminds me of when you fall in love with someone, all the sort of the lust, all those fantasy feelings, just like in
Oh
movies.
yes, May is going on her 32nd year.
But
of
for real, it's like
She's like, I know all
fiery
about
ball
this.
of lust. I know everything about falling out of love. That's what you say.
But you know what I mean? It's just because you don't have the butterfly feelings about the new gym, the new coach, the new athletic wear, the motivation, the fun motivational feelings. I think if we normalize and really emphasize that motivation is just can be a fleeting thing that comes and goes and ups and downs, but for the most part, it's not about motivation. It's about,
Yeah.
well, I'll let you take it from there, about setting goals, following through, putting in the hard work. I mean, no matter what you do, I mean, we can attest to this in going through med school. Do you think we were motivated to study all the time? So what do you advise, and how do you help your clients that are really struggling?
Yeah, so
through
I'll
that?
talk about something real quick briefly, but I have what's called the DARE method, DARE, and I think this is an important, and it's the method to change. I think this method is important, every piece of it, but there's one piece of it that I think is the most important. So anyways, the D stands for discover your mountain, and that's all about that kind of dream reality that we want to think about. Like, where do we want to go? What path do we want to be on? Ideally, not based on what other people are saying, and so on. So that's really important, first of all. By the way, when you're motivated, it's fun to sit down and write all those things down. Okay. The second thing is actions for alignment. So this basically is like putting the plan together. It's one thing to dream about it and write the plan and all of that. It's another thing to actually go out and do it. I was listening to Brene Brown on her podcast a while back, and she was talking about how she's really, really good at discovering her mountain. Like she'll research the best personal trainer in her area for weeks, and then she'll get all the right equipment and she'll get her gym set up, and then it will be like time to actually go into the gym, and she'll be like, I don't know if I want to do this. Right. So there's the actions for alignment. Then there's the roadblocks. I'll come back to that. That's like the barriers. And then the last thing I always talk about is the endless beginning, meaning even when you reach that mountaintop, that's not the end, right? Like, where do we go from there? So the roadblocks piece, I think this is the most important piece, and what ties into motivation being crap, because a big roadblock for people, and with my clients that I find, is they have not learned the skill of dedication and commitment to something, and how hard that is. We talk a lot about sustainable habit changes in our program. And I think sometimes when I talk about sustainable habit changes, my clients think, oh, well, if it's sustainable, that means it's going to be easy. And the reality is that is not true, right? Sustainable means it ends up being something that you just feel like is the right thing to do. So you just keep doing it over and over again because you realize this is the path I want to be on, and this is what's going to make me the healthiest version of myself and all these things. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It's not easy to stay dedicated to something. It's not easy to stay committed to something. It's going to be really hard. And I think when people can come to that realization, like I've had clients literally tell me before, when I realized and really convinced myself that like getting up at 5:30 a.m. to get my workout in is really never going to feel easy, then it actually became a little bit easier to do it, right? Because you change your expectations of what the reality is.
Well,
that's huge. I love that.
No, that's exactly it. I've often thought that what we should do is we should tell people how hard this is. And because all of the charlatans online, everything's easy. Well, like that man, I honest to God want to drive to the guy's house and punch him in the throat. He has some shred something or other supplement, right? Which is, it's not your diet, it's not your exercise, it's not cardio, it's not going to the gym. And he's sitting there eating it. He's got like an 18 pack and he's eating a donut. It's just taking this, shit that he sells, right? And you sit there and you go, okay, so you're trying to I can't stop cussing about this because it's so entirely harmful to people. It's like, this is really, really hard, really hard. And you're saying that everyone's doing the hard thing wrong because really it's just easy and you have the secret. But somehow this guy's making piles of money because he advertises absolutely everywhere. And it's just nuts. I think the Marine Corps had it right. They had after Vietnam, they couldn't recruit anybody. No one, honestly, why would you want to go into the Marine Corps after, not World War I, after Vietnam, rather? Why would you want to do that? So they consulted a marketing guy and he said, don't tell them that it's a great job. Don't tell them that they get their $5 an hour. Don't tell them any of that. Tell them it's the hardest job in the world. And that's what they did. That's where they got the few, the proud, the Marines. It's like, if you want to be a badass, you join the Marines because we are the most difficult branch of the military. Recruiting exploded.
I really like that. And I think the cool thing is then you've set the expectation so that the people that come in, I mean, if there was a fitness program that was literally advertising in that same way, this is going to be really hard. You can't eat donuts except for maybe on a very, occasional basis or whatever it was, instead of saying, oh yeah, you can do all these other things, which some people do that and it's okay. But, then you would get people coming in and there wouldn't be, oh, well, I thought this was going to be easy. You would get people coming in who are like, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to work hard, which I think would be cool.
I'm thinking of fitness competitions. My friend's done them and I right off the bat, I'm like, yeah, we all know how hard that is. All that type of stuff.
Yeah. Certain fitness competitions that rhyme with CrossFit. When they started having 40-year-old men going into the hospital with rhabdomyolysis, I was like, maybe that's a bit much. Maybe we should back off on the pull-ups there, Chief.
So I want to switch gears a tiny bit though and ask you, because people love like details and nitty gritty of specifics from our guests. What are some of the more common things and struggles when you're working with clients that you see? Like, is it under eating, over, more than overeating? I don't know, specific things.
Yeah, too much cardio, too little cardio.
Tim never believed in stretching for the first 50 years of his life, and now he's starting to see the importance.
I still don't really believe. Anyway, the data's not there. The fastest way to flexibility, you can disagree with me, and you're probably right.
Let her talk.
Is exercising in the full range of motion. And that's really critical. If you don't want your back to hurt.
No, I agree. I actually have that as personal experience. Before I started doing Eddie Mobility, I put, and I actually don't even know if I would recommend this to my clients because I'm not there to watch them, but I kept putting heavier and heavier weight on my back, which put me lower and lower and lower over time. And I actually have a very deep squat now. And now I do mobility work, but I kind of had that deep squat before. So I don't disagree with that to some extent.
You weren't that person in the gym with the Instagram post that tipped over backwards and got pinned by the barbell.
But mobility work is different than just stretching. And I think that's the real critical piece to the puzzle. Yeah. There's activation, there's working out in the full range of motion. And, of course there is some stretching to that, but this idea that you're going to do these stretches and it's going to protect you from injury, there's zero evidence.
So, yes, there's a lot more to mobility and staying injury free than just stretching. Especially if someone's just talking about like static stretching, right? There's even a huge difference between a dynamic stretch versus a static stretch. I really love Corey's approach. Corey, for anyone listening, is my boss. She's the owner of Redefining Strength. So we start every routine with a little bit of foam rolling, which can do a variety of things from loosen up a muscle to help a muscle not be overactive. To then we go into a little bit of a dynamic stretch, and then we go into activation. And I think that combination is really important for injury prevention, really being the big one. And helping certain muscles not be overactive when they shouldn't be, which also helps injury prevention. But to answer your question, May, that would be one thing. I mean, I get a lot of clients come in, even clients who are training for an Ironman, or clients who have worked out their entire life, who say, this foam rolling, stretching, and activation thing is really different, and I've never done anything like this, something like that. And the reality is they should have been doing it since they were in their teenage years. So that's a huge one, and something that we do have to really work on the mindset of that, like being open to a new way of doing things. And I will say that is one thing that 90% or higher of the time, people in the end say, this was so beneficial, right? And they've stayed consistent with that fitness routine the entire program and didn't get hurt, right? Whereas maybe they would have in another case. Another thing that, probably the biggest thing that I see with the majority of my clients that we end up needing to change is their protein intake. I mean, that unless someone is already tracking macros, like literally, unless someone is already using MyFitnessPal and they have a 30% or higher protein goal, right? So if a client comes to me and they said, I have never used MyFitnessPal before, I guarantee you their protein is like 10% to 20% max of their total calories, right? So that's huge. I mean, I rarely get a client where I'm not like, the first step is we're going to increase your protein. And a lot of times the response for the client is, I didn't even realize how little protein I was eating. That has to be the biggest thing.
Oh yeah, I know it so well. I mean, because me being a protein lover, and I like meat, and thinking compared to when I watch myself compared to family eat, friends eat, I'm like, wow, I consume a lot of protein. And then you're right, I started tracking with you and I'm like, this is pathetic.
No,
what a shocker.
It's really wild because
when you collect data, it opens your eyes, right? It's just data collection. But unless you
it's really interesting to travel with people and just observe. Like once you've kind of taken it for granted and, you've counted macros for a while and you understand how much protein you need, and then you watch other people and you go, people eat almost all carbs
and fat.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's just, it's, like May's favorite James DeNick. It's like, that's the lethal combination. You can eat nothing but fat and protein and, you can do really well. And I think diabetics do great on keto, especially, et cetera, et cetera. But this super high carbohydrate and super high fat ratio, I actually explained it to a patient yesterday. I said, it's kind of like this. If you have fire and you squirt oxygen on it, you get a massive fire. If you have fire and you squirt hydrogen on it, you get the Hindenburg. If you have two hydrogens and one water and you combine them and you squirt it on the fire, it's
and did
water
your client
and
understand what you were saying?
So yes, because but here's where you're going to understand how skilled I am as a physician. I knew he would understand it, and I picked that analogy because he's an engineer.
Fair.
I thought you were going to say a fireman.
No, but he's like, wow, that's really profound. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a lot of people they did look at me and they're like, what's the
most of the time, and there's probably an exception to this I'm not thinking about, but most of the time, if someone is eating higher carb, like I'm thinking about that guy you guys mentioned who you had on your podcast who hikes all the mountains here in Oregon. What's his name again? Yeah,
Rocky.
I think you mentioned on your podcast that he was eating maybe like 40% protein, 40% carbs, 20% fat or something like that, right? So most of the time, if your carbs are high, your fat's going to be a little bit lower, right? So those balance each other out a little bit, but it's because you're using those carbs, right? Like you're actively daily using those carbs. And if your fat is low, most of the time there's a lot of other healthy benefits to the carbs you're eating. You're eating fruits, you're eating vegetables, you're eating sweet potatoes. You're not eating pizza, you're not eating French fries, you're not eating, Fruit Loops, nachos, those sort of things. So
and yeah. That's true.
No, well, yeah, and when you exercise, when your average daily calorie output is 13,000 calories, it's a little bit different. I mean, and Rocky is a freak. I mean, he is, and he would acknowledge that. But if no one's ever listened to that episode, we'll put it in the show notes. It really is fascinating because the guy will eat 3 extra large pizzas in one sitting, but then he might. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I
devil's
don't-
in the details. He knows his macros down to the ounce just by looking from years and years and years of practice. So yeah, you get to do that twice a year. You don't get to do that as a as a lifestyle.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend following him as a place to
Two
start your
boxes of
fitness
voodoo
journey.
donuts at one sitting. Like just thinking about
No,
that makes
and
me
yeah,
throw
I
up in
mean,
my
like
mouth.
I have a client right now who has 4 Ironman events this summer and fall. She also eats plant-based. And so yeah, anyways, that combination of the two, I have her sometimes at 40% carbs or 45% carbs, but I mean, she's exercising for 4 to 5 hours a day, so she's using those carbs, which I think is the important thing.
So how do you, I'm curious about this because we've had so many shows on diet from, we've had Corey on talk about macros and explain that. We've had carnivore Anthony Chafee who thinks plants are trying to kill you. We've had some other people on.
Because they are.
Life Like Jake, where he actually competed bodybuilding on a plant-based diet. And it's now gone full lion for a while, just eating like a lion. And then we've had immunologists talk about curing your health through plant-based diet and the whole gamut. So we believe, it really is individual. What people have to figure out what works best for their bodies. How do you, as a coach, kind of figure that out if a client's struggling and they don't know what, not just plant versus meat, because that's more on taste and palate, but high fat, low fat. How do you figure that out? Any tips or secrets?
Think the biggest thing, and I'll kind of talk about, I don't know how you would describe this in reality, but like the average person, not someone who's climbing mountains every day, not someone who's a professional athlete, I really do believe in macros, but more so I believe in starting by just logging your food, because I think a lot of people don't even, like we were kind of just talking about, don't even realize what they're eating. And so just starting there, like if I get a client who is very confused and doesn't know where to start, just starting with literally having them log their food and start to understand, oh, well, this food has this in it and that food has this amount of fat in it, just starts to give them so much knowledge without even me having to step in. And so that is always, I think, a really important first step for kind of like the average person. And then figuring out the details, like how many calories, what ratio that they should be on, meaning how much fat, protein, carbs, and fats they should be eating. It's very dependent on the individual, like you said. So it might depend on, is the client in menopause or not, right? We work with a lot of women who are in menopause and this is hard for us to know because we're not doing blood work as part of our program, but if they've gotten blood work before, that can be helpful. But if they've developed some insulin resistance, then we might really start them on lower carb and see how their body reacts to that. A lot of times, like I talked about, we're increasing people's protein because people just aren't eating enough protein. It might depend on their overall activity level, even though that's more calorie based. But yeah, I guess that's my way of saying it. Really just depends on the individual. And I will say there's a little bit of experimenting too. If I get someone who's pretty average activity, like they're maybe getting 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day, they're working out, they're lifting 4 days a week, but they do sit at a desk the majority of the time, and all of that, I may say, and they're not in menopause, I may say, hey, we're going to try a few different ratios over these first few weeks and actually see what your body responds well to. And it is interesting. Like I said, we're not doing that blood work along with it, but just to see, oh, this person actually responds a lot better to 40% carbs than they did to 40% fat. And that does happen sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's what's been really refreshing with working with you and working with Corey is, I've said the only thing more culty than Jim Jones is diets, and it really it's just this weird thing, and like people identify themselves like, what are you? I'm paleo. No, you're not. You're Bill. And it's just like it really is an amazing thing.
It's true.
And it's like, as soon as it works for them, it works for everybody. And I think there's some truth to that at a macro level, but man, oh man. I mean, even Anthony Chafee, one of, his kind of people that he works with, who's a nutritionist, she's like, there's some people, they really do feel better on carnivore, but we have to add just a bit more carbs back. And then they're just completely dialed. And so there's obviously, I mean, yes, humanity is one race of people, but my goodness, we've developed microbiomes and resistances to certain kinds of diseases, et cetera, based on living in vastly different places. We're not.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, like, for example, let's take like the Mediterranean diet, right? If someone goes from eating all those things we just talked about, like hamburgers, nachos, pizza, they go to the Mediterranean diet, of course they're going to start to lose weight, right? They're cutting out so many carbs from their diet. They're cutting out so much fat. They're cutting calories probably extensively, even maybe without even realizing. Of course they're going to lose weight. But something that we talk about a lot I talk a lot about with my clients is the sustainability of what you're doing. And I'll do it. I don't know if you guys will be okay with this, but I'm going to kind of throw like Weight Watchers under the bus. I was actually it was a client who was telling me this. Okay. It was a client who was actually telling me this. And she was telling me that she had done Weight Watchers in the past and she actually would lose weight on it. But then whenever she would try and wean herself off of the program, she would start to gain the weight right back. And she was realizing, because she was always going off of their point system, which works when you're in the program, when she would go off into the real world and look at a nutrition label that doesn't have points, it has calories, it has protein, it has carbs. And she's like, I don't know now what to do. Right. And so in that sense, that wasn't sustainable. That wasn't something she could keep going with. And so that, regardless of even someone's macros and what they are, that's something that we focus on a lot of in our program, is like building the knowledge base. So even if you're not in menopause, once you go in menopause, if you read, I should just lower my carbs a little bit, you actually know how to do that, whether I'm there anymore or not.
No, that's perfect. It's just the basic educational stuff that, I mean, having a science background, I'm like, who doesn't know what carbs, protein, and fat are? But
a lot of people.
Most people don't.
But, it's really interesting. If you get back to ultra endurance athletes, this was back 1998. We were at the Ironman in Hawaii, and we did a medical conference there. And it was really fascinating because there was Mark Allen and Dave Scott. So the two greatest, they're icons, they're ancient icons now of the sport. Dave Scott ate probably 80% of his calories were carbs, because it's like, you need carbs to fuel. And Mark Allen was like,
give me a box of donuts and I'll go for a bike.
And what the thing that was fascinating is when they actually did muscle biopsies on all these guys, they realized that the people that win, that are the most elite Ironman triathletes, it all comes down to who can metabolize fat the most efficiently into fuel. And so you have one guy who's like the elite of the elite who could do that by eating carbs, and yet another guy just kind of ate whatever the hell he wanted. And it was just like, man, it's so, I mean, like Bill Rogers would run 10 miles in the morning and 10 miles in the evening, and then he would eat pizza with mayonnaise on it.
That's gross, first of all, but yeah.
That is really gross.
That is why, we don't obviously go to those big of extremes, but when I talk to a client, like on the very first call, I always try and throw in, there's going to be a little experimenting that we're doing with this. There's not like and that's also kind of makes it a little bit hard when a client leaves. They're like, what should I do? And I'll always give them suggestions. And again, like I said, they've built up that knowledge base of at least knowing generally what they could do, but what works now might not always work either for your body based on how it's changing and stuff like that too.
Well, and activity levels and what sports you're doing. I mean, there's a million different variables.
Right. Okay. Well, I know we're running out of time, but I have to get you to talk a little bit here about your podcast, which I love, Making Changes, Breaking Barriers. Can you, share the inspiration for wanting to do that and not just helping people through coaching one-on-one?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Making Changes, Breaking Barriers. You can check it out on pretty much any podcast platform. And actually, with my current position I have at Redefining Strength, I started a class that we ran every Monday morning called Magical Mindset. And like I've told you guys before, I mean, I've always had this passion. I was a psychology major in college, but just have always had a passion for the mindset behind doing anything kind of hard in our life. And so I got to throw that passion into that class, Magical Mindset, come up with a different topic every week, anything to do with building self-confidence to having better boundaries with the people around us so that we can actually do the things that we want to do and take care of ourselves. And, just a wide variety of things that that have to do with mindset and making changes in our lives. And I really, really loved it. And I was like, if I'm doing this, I should put this, into my own form, into a podcast. So that was the inspiration behind it. And yeah, we have almost 40 episodes to this point. I do solo episodes and guest interviews as well. The guests that I try and have onto my podcast are anywhere from people who have just done really cool things with their life, whether that's starting their own business or some sort of cool physical challenge. I also try and get, some psychologists as well as counselors, life coaches on there and talk about their experience working with people in the world. And yeah, so I think if you like what we talked about today, then you'll probably, should check out the podcast. So.
Well, I love it because I love the whole mindset piece behind it. You have great guests as well. I personally like the episodes you do solo the most, just because it is more instructive to me. But who would be your favorite guest that you've had on if you had to pick one? Or is that too tough because you feel like you have to say certain person's name that I'm thinking?
I have enjoyed everyone I've had on. I really enjoyed talking to Dr. Adia Gooden. She is a PhD and I feel like I'm a little bit on the spot here, but I just loved that conversation because she was so fun and personable, and I think for an interview she kept it very entertaining and had lots of good things to say about her transition from working at the university system to then finding the motivation and confidence to start her own business. And she's now a public speaker and has a pretty big social media platform, and so that was just a very enjoyable conversation for me personally.
Yeah, I'm going to add one more thing from when we were working together, which is trust the system. I think that's really important because you are not going to starve people to death nutritionally. It may be a bit of a challenge at times, especially it is different. Your body is going to change. It's not simple. It's not easy. But people expect this 12, 13, 15 pounds in the first week or two, which is just completely nuts. That's what they, get sold on social media. Trust the system, because I can tell you it works.
Oh, I thought you were talking about a podcast episode. You lost me for a second.
No, I'm just saying.
His brain sometimes. I'm like, hey, Christina, I'm sure is going, what? No.
No, it's just that you really do.
That's his
you
bunny
make
trail brain.
You make changes, and you have to stick. Well, and that's the name of the podcast. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point. Is you're breaking barriers. And that's it. Because if what you were doing worked before,
exactly. And I do talk about it on the podcast, and I talk about that with my clients all the time. That and I literally will say that sometimes if it comes to it, like, you joined this program for a reason. What you were doing wasn't working before, and so even if this isn't the perfect journey now, like, let's focus on the small wins and see the progress that is actually happening, as even if it isn't exactly like you wanted it to be.
Yes, right. I love it.
I find if you add lard ass after, it helps people.
Man, I might lose my job. Don't give me that advice. So,
some people are into that negative reinforcement. I don't know. It's kind of sick and twisted.
No, but it is weird. Like, people think they can, like, even in business, like, where you have to come alongside your coworkers and coach them. People actually think negative reinforcement is helpful.
Yeah, it's militant style. You wouldn't
weird,
do it.
Man.
You're
not training your dog to not.
Yeah, that might be. I might hit my
She's
limit with that as a coach. So yeah, I'll try and coach each individual like they want to be coached. But yeah, that may be a limit for me. So.
Exactly.
So I think I know most of your social media platforms, but I'll let you tell our listeners where to find you, or if they want to work with you.
Yeah,
how to get a hold of you.
Can find me on pretty much all the social media platforms, but my main one, I guess, would be Instagram at Change with Coach K. You can pretty much search Change with Coach K on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and you'll find me. I do post my video versions of my podcast on YouTube. So if you search Change with Coach K, you'll find those. And yeah, if you want to work with me, like I said, right now I do work for Redefining Strength. So I would go to redefiningstrength.com and set up a call, and that would kind of start the process. And if you did want to work with me specifically, just mention my name and your initial call, and then we'll get connected.
Awesome. Of course, I will link all of those and the podcast It was so good having you on, and good to see you again, Christina. Thanks for taking the time to be here and share all your insightful thoughts and expertise with our audience. I miss working with you. And once my physical therapist has cleared me to actually lift up more than a cup of coffee, I might be calling you back up.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This has been really fun.
Both Tim and I want to extend our total gratitude to Coach K for sharing her expertise and experiences with us. It was great and fun talking with her again, and an honor to have her on our show. And if you enjoyed this episode and found value in our conversation, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with your friends and family. Your support helps us continue to bring you valuable, no-nonsense content straight to you via Rumble, YouTube, and the podcast every week. And remember, your health and well-being are valuable assets. Take small steps each day to invest in yourself and your future. We'll see you next week.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more, and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
But we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.